In this video, I'll be counting down 10 more of the rarest Pokemon in Pokémon GO. This is, of course, a follow-up to a previous top 10 list video of the same topic, in which I had some very notable and very obvious omissions. If there is a particular rare Pokemon that you expected to be in this video, but is not in it, then make sure you check the previous top 10 rarest Pokemon video. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Now, all of the Pokemon on this list video are extremely difficult to get, and some of them are even impossible today. But of course, several of these Pokemon could be re-released after I upload this video, thus making them significantly less rare in the future. However, at the time I published this video, every single one of these Pokemon are not easily obtainable to the average player. Number 10. Shiny Sunglass Squirtle. Now, out of all of the Pokemon on this list, this is probably the rarest Pokemon that most players will actually have. This is of course because getting this particular Pokemon was nearly guaranteed for all players who played during Squirtle Community Day back in 2017. However, this means that only those players will likely have this shiny in their collection, as Sunglasses Squirtle was not made available more than once after that specific community day. This is one of those shiny Pokemon that has increasing returns with its rarity. As the game goes further and further away from Squirtle Community Day, the supply of this shiny diminishes. Even for myself, I don't have too many of this particular shiny left in my collection, as I've traded away most of them to other players over time. Therefore, I had to include this particular Pokemon on this list, as we are seeing less and less of them as the game goes on. Of course, Niantic may bring this particular shiny back to Pokémon GO in future events, which is something we already saw recently with its inclusion in the recent Ed Sheeran cross-promotion event. But since these events are only for a limited time, and you would not have the boosted shiny rates, getting this shiny outside of trades with longtime players is likely not going to happen. Number 9. Shiny Broken Heart Spinda. Now here is a shiny that not a lot of players will have. Spinda is one of those Pokemon that has the distinct characteristic of having several variant patterns with its spots. One of these variants is specifically tied to Valentine's Day events every year, where a heart-shaped spot over its right eye can be seen. However, the shiny version of this variant has a unique design of a broken heart instead of a regular heart. Since getting shiny Spinda requires you to complete several research tasks that reward Spinda, getting this particular shiny is quite difficult given that you only have the short time window of Valentine's Day in order to get it. This difficulty is compounded by the fact that Spinda research tasks are quite rare to come by in and of itself, and the shiny rate is also abysmally low. Therefore, shiny Broken Heart Spinda is quite worthy of being on this list, as very few people will have it. Number 8. Shiny Smoochum. Now on a similar vein with shiny Broken Heart Spinda, this particular shiny Pokemon is both time-locked behind a specific annual event and is very difficult to get during that event. Smoochums only appear during Fashion Week and can only be obtained through research tasks and hatching eggs. This means that getting the shiny version of this Pokemon is going to be extremely difficult. Unlike other event shinies, which you could typically get through a massive number of wild spawns, this shiny would only be obtainable from 7km eggs, of which there is a hard daily limit, or research tasks that reward this Pokemon. There is also no guarantee that this Pokemon will always be featured during each year's Fashion Week, as I'm sure Niantic would love to include new and different kinds of costume Pokemon during these events in order to drive up the hype around them. Thus, shiny Smoochum may just be one of the rarest Pokemon you can get in this game. Number 7. Shiny Halloween Costume Drifblim. This costume Pokemon made its debut into Pokémon GO through raid battles in the most recent Halloween in-game event. Now the rarity of this Pokemon will diminish over the years as we have more and more Halloween events, as this will likely be a commonly featured raid encounter during these events. However, since it is exclusive to raids and it has the time-locked characteristic of most costume Pokemon, this particular shiny will, and should, be considered one of the rarest as not many players will have it. I must also note that out of all of the Pokemon on this list, this rare shiny is probably the most useful. That is of course because it is a pre-evolved form, whereas most of the Pokemon on this list cannot evolve because they are a costume variant. Therefore, this particular shiny is unique and widely sought after. Number 6. Shiny Costumed Spheal. This shiny Pokemon is the newest addition to the game, and not a lot of players have it. While the rarity of this shiny is certainly going to go down over time, as it will likely be featured in future Christmas events, it is still worthy of being considered a super rare Pokemon. Given that it is time-locked behind a yearly event, and the shiny rates when it is out is extremely low, getting one of these shinies is going to be extremely difficult. Also, like most of the time-locked Pokemon on this list, much of these previous costume Pokemon are likely to be pushed aside for newer costume Pokemon every time the event happens. This means that the next Christmas-themed event will likely feature a new costume Pokemon that players will be seeking after, and this costume Spheal will no longer be the focus. If you are lucky enough to have this particular shiny, then you should definitely hold on to it, as it will likely be a rare one for years to come. Number 5. Wild Caught Shiny Ditto. Now, Shiny Ditto is not going to be rare, as it was the guaranteed reward for players who completed the special research for last year's Kanto Tour event, but recently it was made possible to catch Shiny Ditto in the wild. However, getting a wild-caught Shiny Ditto is going to be extremely difficult, as even a regular Ditto is a very uncommon encounter. Add on to the fact that most spawn pools that would get you a Ditto are often pushed aside for event spawns. The likelihood that you would come across a shiny Ditto in the wild is slim to none. Therefore, if you happen to have, let's say, a level 1 shiny Ditto with only 10 combat points, you have probably one of the rarest Pokemon you can have in this game. Number 4. Shiny Bowtie Butterfree. Interestingly, this is one of those costume shinies that flew completely under many players' radar. This may be because the event that first featured this Pokemon had so many other costume Pokemon that players were more concerned with picking up any of those over this one. Needless to say, not a lot of players have this particular shiny, and even less players are even aware of its existence. I think it's safe to say that if you have this shiny Pokemon, you are certainly going to surprise players when you show it off as your buddy, or if you throw it in a gym. Number 3. Shiny Unown C. In case you forgot about it like I did, Niantic held a handful of city spotlight events back in 2020, and one of the highlights of these events was Shiny Unown C being a possible encounter. However, the shiny rate for this Pokemon was reportedly really low, and the event was only available to players in very specific cities for only a day. This particular shiny never made a reappearance since these events. On top of that, not a whole lot of players even participated in these events, as it was during the middle of the high point of the pandemic. This means that several players were in lockdown and likely were not able to grind out these Pokemon. Shiny Unowns are already pretty rare in and of themselves, but the circumstances surrounding this particular Unown makes it that much more rare. Without question, this is one of the rarest shiny Pokemon you can have, as very few players will have it. Number 2. Shiny Straw Hat Pikachu. Now here's a Pokemon that is absolutely deserving to be on this list. Straw Hat Pikachu's debut, and one of his few appearances in Pokémon GO, was tied to a very specific and short event that correlated with a One Piece anniversary event in Japan. This means that you only had a brief opportunity to pick up this shiny. Of course, Straw Hat Pikachu did make very brief appearances in later events, but given that you never had boosted shiny rates whenever this Pokemon was out, it's going to be very uncommon that you will find a player with this particular shiny. For this reason, I would most certainly consider this costume shiny Pokemon as one of the rarest in the game. Number 1. Shiny Detective Hat Pikachu. Now the main reason why I made this video in the first place is because I made the absolutely dumb mistake of excluding this shiny Pokemon from the previous list. Shiny Detective Hat Pikachu is by far the rarest Pokemon in the game. The reason for this is because this Pokemon was never officially available in the game, but it was possible to get this shiny if you were to tap on the Pokemon almost immediately before the Detective Pikachu event ended, and the encounter screen starts immediately after the event ended. This means you had a few milliseconds of a window to get this shiny. And of course, the encounter with the Detective Pikachu had to be a shiny, which would have been on the super low wild shiny rate. Currently, the very minuscule number of people who do have this shiny are some of the luckiest players in the world. I'm actually curious if Niantic ever plans to release this shiny Pokemon officially, but since the original release of this Pokemon was tied to the movie release of Detective Pikachu, I don't think it will even make a return to Pokemon GO anytime soon. So there you have it, these were even more of the rarest Pokemon in Pokemon GO. But let me know, is there a particular rare Pokemon that you thought would be on this list? Do you have any of the Pokemon on this list? Definitely let me know in the comments below. Also, don't forget that I already have a video listing the top 10 of the rarest Pokemon in Pokemon GO, so be sure to check that out. I'll leave a link in the description below. With that said, I am Count Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you all later.